folks. Welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show coming to you on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone so we can stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And as I continue on and begin to vet and put together what will become at least the first book of mine, it's evident now a chapter must be dedicated to those who were able to cultivate the talent, bring the talent into the studio, and then engineer a record where the warmth of the record comes through and hits somebody's soul, hits them in the heart to the point where they are just playing it over and over and over again, almost in an OCD fashion. And that comes from the recording techniques. And in many ways, recording techniques have changed with technology. And I got a chance today to talk to a master engineer and producer, musician in his own right, from the Midwest, Motown, Detroit, Sussex, Mo West. He's done it all. Mike Theodore, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, Jake, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. You know, I haven't heard Jonathan Round in a long time.
In Question of the Unicorn. And
West of the Unicorn, yeah, that was a good one.
Who was, the thing that was interesting to me, it was this guy, Sam Faucini on drums.
Okay, yeah, that was just a local guy, I don't remember him that well, to be honest with you, but he was one of the local players in town.
Well, I was going to say, because what I really wanted to ask you about is if you could talk about how the groove changed from funk and what the Motown cats were playing, what Coffee, what you were doing in the early 70s, versus when the drum machine came in and disco came in. What changed about the groove?
You know what? Every decade has its own rhythm, if you will. So to say what changed about the groove is like looking at history. What changed about the percussion section, you know? So it's every period had its own swing, if you will, you know?
To me, there was, what happened, I was born in 78, just for some point of reference. I essentially, there came a point where, as it related to music in general, people started to play straight beats because that's what was making pop records, whereas letting the own individual style of the drummer come out. And that seems to me like disco came in and the music sped up. But I'm trying to figure out how the notes, or how it changed fundamentally. How the groove, if you could just dissect how the groove changed between what was, and how much responsibility of that had to do with the fact that all of a sudden it was automated computers, machines making the grooves as opposed to human beings.
Well, you know, when disco first started, it wasn't machines, it was live drummers. Dennis and I did a lot of disco records, and I did, you know, my own orchestra records, and it was all live drums. The drum machines came along as an evolution of technology. The beats didn't change, it's just how they were being produced. I think the drum patterns over time are really a reflection of somebody did a beat and it became popular, it was a hit, then everybody copied it. Then that was the style of that period. Disco was all four on the floor. It was straight four bass drums. And that style was used in many other places. It was just, it's just a place in time where the rhythm worked with the dance style and the mood of the people who were buying the music.
I love that. That was fantastic. But I mean, yeah. So let's just put. Listen, you nailed it. I'm gonna put in a. I want to put in a piece of music here that backs up you and Coffee using real drummers playing disco. Okay, and then we'll come back and break it down. How's that sound to your ears, man?
Well, that was CJ and Company, obviously, but that was there's a transition in that cut. It's somewhere between funk and disco. The group, the hit of that group was The Devil's Gun, which was really disco. And it was the song that opened Studio 54 in New York. It was the first song they played.
Wow.
Record, as opposed to the one you just played. You'll hear the transition from.
Yeah, no, well, that's the Theodore. Listen, the Theodore trademark. I mean, listen, Instant Coffee, Chicano. Do you know that tune?
That's a long time ago on that one.
Okay, but I'm just telling you, man, you did the same thing with that, and I don't have it queued up, but it starts out like kind of a galloping, tune, and then all of a sudden it breaks into the serious transition, funk. When did you first start to hone in? That seems to be kind of your niche. I'd like you to talk about the first time you realized that the transitions, meaning genre mixing, was absolutely essential for groove music.
Well, if you look back at the stuff, I started out way back in a group called the Shades of Blue back in the 60s called Oh, How Happy You Have Made Me. That was the first record I ever arranged. It was on Golden World, or Impact Records, and we recorded it at Golden World. And at that point, there was a friction between pop and R&B in the style, you know what I mean? And that particular cut was kind of where we started to feel the evolution of blending a little more funk into the pop. And from that point on, I got to say just about everything that I did and we did, Dennis and I, always had that, that funk undercurrent either in pop or over the disco scene. And it was kind of just inborn Detroit feeling, you know what I mean?
No, I mean I completely dig it.
Contradiction to that may be.
There's no contradiction. I just want you to talk about this friction between pop and R&B at that time. I mean, for somebody who was not on this planet.
Well, there wasn't really a friction in the sense that it was a fight. It was almost an admiration, a feeling that you just got, that you liked the pulse and the rhythm, and then maybe you like the pop sensibility of the melody. So it was a natural blending. I think Motown did it just about in every record they made, you know what I mean? There was always a pop sensibility of melody with a funk sensibility of rhythm. So I think it's just a natural blending of elements that made a pleasing result that people enjoyed. And that would be what I'd have to say, because I can't really dissect it any other way.
Well, no, you're doing great. I mean, it had to make you dance, right?
You know what? It had to make your neck move. It had to give you a feeling.
The duck walk. Yeah. Okay. Let's put this tune in, because this to me is the Coffee Theodore legacy right here. Hold on. Yeah, you probably haven't heard that in a while.
That was more of a fusion of jazz and funk, actually.
You're. I mean, I'm just trying to paint the landscape. So, I mean, first of all, before I forget, can you talk about where you found Jonathan Round?
You know, at that time in Detroit, we had just finished another guy that was doing pop too, a guy named Rodriguez, which was a hit recently, and a guy named Paul Parrish. Um, so we were doing, I guess you might say, a folkier kind of funk, psychedelic period. We were going through there. And it seems like Jonathan Round was another folk singing character in Detroit who we came across at a club. And oddly enough, the fellow that was managing him, a guy named George Goulson, had been the manager of my band many, many years before when I was in high school.
How many years before?
And he was a lot of years, in the late 50s. So George was a college guy at the time, and we were all like in the 8th grade or 9th grade or somewhere in there. And he had managed us, and believe it or not, got us a deal with Motown, but our parents wouldn't sign because we were just kids. But then, to make the story even stranger, the record we recorded it as a demo, here 60 years later or so, is picked up and used on television now by Showtime.
Are you kidding me?
No, in the Ray Donovan show. It was just totally bizarre.
So, but I mean, how did they even access? I mean,
it was just a kibitz one day. I had a tape left from the time, and I played it for one of the guys at Light in the Attic, a record label.
Sure.
This is a joke.
Sure.
And he said, "I'm going to place this for you," and he did. I couldn't believe it. But anyway, to get back to your point, George had been our manager at that time. All these years later, he contacted me because, I was very busy in the music business at this point. And Dennis and I were doing one group or another. And he introduced us to John Round. We took John Round to Westbound Records. And Armin Baladian backed him. We cut an album. It came out, and that didn't really happen. But maybe, who knows, maybe it'll happen now. It's pretty good stuff, really.
It reminds me of a Northern Soul Dr. John kind of vibe.
Yeah.
I was going to say, who is this Harlem? Who was the guy that backed him? Who is that cat?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question.
Who was the cat that backed him? Harlem somebody?
No, Armin Baladian.
Yeah, who was that?
Who was the president of Westbound Records. And Westbound Records was a Detroit label, and better known for funk. Groups like the Funkadelic, the Ohio Players, the Fantastic Four, those groups, a lot of them.
Well, no, what I'm really trying to get, obviously, what I really want Mike Theodore to paint the picture of is that Motown was essentially, if you really listen in my ears to that music, that's acoustic soul. That's sweet soul music. And
we used all the Motown musicians.
Of course, no. But I'm saying, like, the idea with Westbound was, because I interviewed George Clinton. I should send you that interview because he was always at the 20 grand. Spider Webb couldn't take the R&B. The jazz clubs had R&B all over. But the point is that, what was the Harmon's concept saying, hey, we now have a genre called funk. It was never called funk before. But that's clearly what you were adding to the Westbound vibe.
Well, we were adding I think with Jonathan Round, we were adding a sort of a pop.
Absolutely. I love it. But there was not enough of that. It was mostly funk.
Well, for his label, yeah, it was all funk and gospel. But he did have some pop groups. And we did mostly funk and disco for Westbound, but this was that one exception. And I just don't think, like so many of the other acts that came from this city that were really good, it just didn't hook at the time. You know, and you could see it with Rodriguez, for example. We got him about that same time. Nothing happened with him until, 50 years later when he gets a film about him. And
Dude, it's so insane. I've never even seen. I don't watch TV, but I do know that doc was made about him. But when I interviewed Coffee, he said that you guys went to a club. He had his back turned to the audience.
Well, he was a total eccentric.
Right.
He would sing to the wall, and people loved him. It just, I don't know what to say. He was Jonathan Rodriguez and Paul Parrish were three artists that were pop folk singers, urban folk pop singers, I should say, from Detroit, who should have made it big time, but didn't at the time, So.
Who was Parrish?
Paul Parrish had an album on, I believe it was MGM. We had it out on. It was called The Forest of My Mind. And he had a lot of good material in there. I think you could probably find him in YouTube or somewhere. Everything seems to be out there these days.
Is he still with us, or did he pass away?
No, he's still alive. He lives in the West Coast.
I mean,
apparently he had a fairly successful career in England, I understand.
I think that what you guys were doing, it's did you?
We did. You know what it was?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, Jake.
Go ahead.
We were doing everything from country music to folk music to bubblegum music to funk to disco. We were doing everything. And we were...
I love it.
Like,
I love
in the
it,
kitchen, mixing up stuff, but it always had funk in it.
Always funk, man. And it's just like that's where the Jake Feinberg Show lies, right in the crack, man. Like, it's hypnotic, neck shaking, rhythm. That's the interesting thing about it is like, when did you first, as a musician, play with a trap drummer?
Well, the odd thing is, I started my life as a drummer.
Really?
When I was in grade school and high school, I was a drummer. I played with a band. We had a bit. The drum in me, if you will. I mean, of course, I played other things, saxophone, trumpet, and piano as I became more of an arranger. The piano was the best instrument to do scores with,
Did you go see Coltrane and Miles at the West End Inn? I think that's what it was called. There used to be a place. Did you go see the Shaman Jazz Cats?
No, not really. I got to admit that I've never been involved in that early jazz scene at all.
No, but I'm saying you just, as a fan of music, like what were you going to? Your career had already started when. Were you going to see George Clinton way before P-Funk at the 20 grand when he was no one?
You're asking a question which is interesting. I wasn't one of these people that went to see people. I was more of a listener of what they recorded.
I love it. No, I'm a hermetically sealed cat too. When Coffee said that you discovered Rodriguez at a club, I just figured you were out looking for talent.
Well, no. Well, we did do that to some degree. Like one of the other groups we found in a club was a group called the Sunliners, who went on to become the group called Rare Earth.
Wow, you discovered them?
Yeah, in fact, I named them.
What hasn't Mike Theodore done at this point in his life?
Well, here's what happened.
Yeah.
We had an album on them, and we did it for MGM, and they were called the Sunliners. Come to find, before the album comes out, that another group had trademarked the name Sunliners, and we couldn't use it. So we were stuck there. What are we going to call this? And I believe I was just finishing up my college chemistry course, and I just thought of the periodic table. I said, rare earth. That's the name. They went on.
What university? Were you at Wayne State? Where were you?
At that time I was in Highland Park College.
And you were in chemistry class, and you got the name Rare Earth. That's epically classic.
Well, that's how it happened. Have you ever heard their first album, Rare Earth?
I'm not going to sit here and say that. I'm not going to say they're in my bag. So riff on it any way you want.
Okay. I think you'd find that first album really interesting if you can dig it up anywhere.
What was it? What was it? What label is it? I mean, is it? It's not a Mercury or anything, is it?
It was on MGM.
MGM.
You may be able to find it on YouTube. What happened is when Motown decided one day that they were going to take the group from us. I think Harry Balk was in charge of the label. So they made a deal with Clarence Avant, who actually was the backer of this. And lo and behold, the group went over to Motown, and they started a label and called it Rare Earth, too. I never forgot the attorney from Motown, Rel Seltzer, I think his name was. I'm not sure. No, one of them, Barney Ailes, called me up and wanted me to sign a trademark paper turning the name Rare Earth over to them so I wouldn't sue them. I was just a kid. I didn't know anything about it.
What did your gut tell you? What did your gut tell you at that time?
My gut said do it because I'm not going to hold them back. Why should I?
I dig. I really appreciate your honesty, man. I think it's really...
The truth of the matter is we got some royalty off their first album anyway, so...
I mean, do you feel like in your... Can you talk a little bit about the Dharma that you've created and how that led to, opportunities like, the putting together your orchestra? Like, you feel like, you weren't... Nobody played you for a fool, but obviously you look back on certain things and it's the racket. Music business is the racket, but ultimately if you keep your heart open, you do get rewarded.
You know what? I'm a collector of people in a way. I've never closed a door, never burned a bridge, and never sued anybody, and never really got in a disagreement with anybody. Amounted to any kind of major problem. I just believe we're all trying to do the best we can, and that's what I did. So,
can you talk about? I mean, could you talk a little bit about? We're talking to one of the heaviest cats here, Mike Theodore, on the Jake Feinberg Show. Like this, I don't know if there were cats on the West Coast that, I mean, very good dear friends of mine like Ed Bogus. I don't know if you ever crossed paths with him from Fantasy, and Jim Stern and those cats, but they used to like record Cal Jader gigs at the Funky Quarters in San Diego, running the mics, running the whole rig out of a truck, and this burning at Maury Baker's Lounge with Dennis Coffey. You're listed as production on that, but did you record it that night?
Yeah, you know what we did? We brought in a 4-track recorder, and we had one of our friends was an engineer who owned the machine, so it was recorded live, and that's the set from beginning to end, the way it was, and it was just putting a couple mics up on the stage. And go, that was it. Just play and record. That was the end of the story.
But let me ask you though, I would love you to talk about. I mean, Maury Baker's Lounge, not to be confused with Baker's Keyboard Lounge, which is, I guess Dennis has a CD coming out from there as well, which is really going to confuse people. But what in your mind when you're recording live in a bar or whatever the Baker's was at that time, what was, especially the drums, how did you mic the drums?
It was just simple. It was just, it was just putting 2 or 3 mics up over everything. 4 microphones. One for each track, and I think there was a direct box on the guitar and a mic. It was just almost like just making a live stereo recording. It wasn't a drum mic on a bass drum and the cymbals, it was just overhead. And that's it. It was just live overhead recording. And there was no technique, no magic involved.
Well, but nowadays every drum is mic'd, and so here's my thing. What's that?
A lot of times, if you go and see a live recording of like a big orchestra,
right?
There's just a couple mics hanging over the top of the orchestra, and the band makes their own dynamics. Dennis's trio that night, it was their own dynamics. Just having the mic overhead and recording it, because all we had was 4 tracks. And there was no mixing of every particular element of the drum kit. It was just an overhead recording.
I want you to talk about, this is important for younger engineers because they have a tendency to, we have all the technology to make things, to have quote unquote perfect sound. You're talking about the dynamics of the room. There is such thing as good leakage. Can you talk about an experience in the studio of leakage where it became, where the groove just really kicked in?
I think that becomes a question of what is the dynamic of the room. I mean, the reverberation time of the room. I don't consider myself an engineer, but I'll tell you this, that if the room has a good live sound, you may want to capture that live sound with some overhead mics and then mix it into the overall, mix, so to speak, to give the room, give a dimension to it. There was a time when everybody was trying to isolate everything. We had a gate on this, we had a gate on that. We had baffles everywhere. But it was all a dynamic to control the reverb time and the bleed of one instrument onto another track, so to speak.
Can you talk? This is important because were there I'm always interested in why it went from just 11 cats basically hugging each other, Ashford, Van Dyke, Coffey, like those cats, Jamerson, they were all plugged into the direct board. 11 Jack Brokenshaw in the overdub room, but were recordings getting messed up because of bleeding of instruments bleeding into one another? The baffles thing is fascinating to me. I mean, and ultimately, this is the other question I have for you, is that Van Dyke Parks, he would bring Keltner, all these studio cats in to the session, and they'd be playing baffles, and they wouldn't do any overdubs. They just play. They really would walk out of the sessions having no freaking clue what they played, and then Van Dyke would come back in the next day and piece it together and make it some magical stuff. So what was your process?
Well, that is, of course, the reality is when you need the isolation. If you're really trying to put together a situation where you want to be able to isolate the instrument, feature it here and solo it and whatever, you really can't have all the bleed of other instruments on that track. So that became more of a function of this multi-track recording, where you were trying to isolate each instrument in order to play with it later. But in a live recording scenario, it's really you're trying to capture the performance as it happens and not manipulate it later. So that might be the difference you're talking about.
When you did the Mike Theodore Orchestra,
Well, we did sections.
so explain that. Did you get it did you play a couple of times live ready so that you could break it up, but everybody was ready to cook? How did you get them ready to hit if it was breaking it up into different sections?
Well, I mean, it's called writing the music out. That's how you do that. Basically, you start with the rhythm section, and you have good players, and you got the parts basically written, the changes that are going to be done, and you work it down with the rhythm. Then, in my case, I would bring in a horn section or a brass section. There is a difference in that terminology, by the way. I found out the hard way.
What's the differentiation?
If you tell the concertmaster to bring the horns in at 2 o'clock, only people that are going to show up are the French horns.
Oh, my gosh.
Which I did, of course, one time. And the rest of the brass players never showed up.
Yeah, but that's between Detroit, right? That's lost in translation between.
No, that's probably everywhere. If you say horns, they mean French horns.
So I'm sorry. What do you have to refer to get the entire stable in there?
The brass section.
The brass section. I dig. So talk about how you
that doesn't include the woodwinds. If you want the woodwinds, you got to say that too.
Oh my gosh.
Of course, the modern guys, the horn section is brass and saxes. That's it,
Right.
So, but anyway, then you would overdub the brass section. The music's all written out based on what we did in the rhythm section. So the horns just read the chart and play it down one time and you're done. Same with the strings. Bring in the violins, the cellos, bring them all in. Their music's all written. They just read it and play it and then you're done. Then a series of overdubs like soloists, vocalists, and additional percussion. And then maybe you're back down to trying to edit it all. So
when you were in the studio with for instance, Rodriguez, Coffey said that he couldn't even be around other musicians. Like you had to create the rhythm. You had to create the rhythm.
Rodriguez is a special case.
No. I know, but I'm even talking today. Like, was that a staple for Theodore? The idea of always, because this is really fascinating. The old school mentality was you lay the rhythm tracks down, and then the vocalists put it together. Depends on how long it takes them to get it together. Today, in my travels, when I interview younger cats, because of the sterilization and the technology, they actually do the vocals first, and they can just put automated electronic grooves in, or get people. But it's the opposite now. Why would you guys lay the rhythm down first?
You know what it is? Didn't have the technology then to sync things up that much. But I can see your point. I mean, yeah, obviously you could take a vocal today and slap a rhythm around it easily. But back then it was just customary to have the band and either the singer with the band at the same time, or overdub things around, overdub the singer later with the band. Usually, a lot of times we had a singer there doing a reference track sometimes the band could hear the singer, what the song is. And many times we didn't have anybody, just music, you know.
Well, I mean, it was also like I mean, how many times did you actually just take the first take of everything you did, first or second take?
It depends on the quality of the guys who were playing.
Well, but I'm like, for instance, with the Theodore Orchestra, you got the horns ready, you got the brass, ready to go. Were they able to?
There's one thing you got to remember is that those sessions were like union sessions. You had 3 hours in a normal session to do, 3 songs or 4, whatever you could do in that period of time, scale. So it was up to you to make sure the charts were tight enough and clear enough and right, no mistakes, hopefully, that you could count it down and good players would play it in 1 take or maybe 2. You may want to change some kind of phrasing or bowing technique or something, after the first take, and then the second take is usually it. So it was usually within the first couple of takes you were done with a song.
But I mean, even though Rodriguez was an eccentric cat, most of your sessions, even Westbound, involved laying the rhythm tracks first before getting the vocalist in.
Well, but now there was some exceptions to that. That John Round you played.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
Well, John played with the rhythm section live, and we could overdub his vocal after if he wanted to do it again. But he played with the band. Rodriguez played a couple songs with the band, but most of the time he would just play his song, and then we'd overdub the drums and stuff after he left, and the whatever strings or horns we used with him. The same thing with most of these groups that we did that were of the pop nature. A lot of times they were there performing. So I guess it's different. Each particular song or artist maybe has a different story on it as to whether they just stuck to a track or whether they were there at the time. See, John played on his sessions. That made a difference. Rodriguez played on his sessions. And Paul Parrish played a lot on his stuff. So
I'm actually looking right now. The name of the album, the Rare Earth album, Dreams Answers.
Dreams and Answers.
Dreams and can I tell you something? On the All Music Guide, it has Dreams /Answers.
Okay, well,
I've never seen this, and it's. I also want to ask you. I mean, there were incredible Westbound records, coming out of like New Jersey. There were soul groups, and their names are just escaping me now. So, I mean, did you guys, or did Harmon go and seek to find the cats that were cooking in other regional parts of the country?
I'm sure that people came to him because he was having a pretty good successful run. And I really can't speak for how he acquired his acts, you know what I mean? Because when we started working for Harmon, it was most of these acts had already been there. We came in to Westbound primarily at the disco area. I mean, after the John Round thing, which was previous, we went off to L.A. to work in California for several years. And then when we came back to Michigan, it was back to work for Westbound. And it was primarily to get the dance market for him, the disco market. Because we'd gotten pretty successful in that particular arena at that time, you know.
No, I mean you know your career. You know your career better than me. I'm looking at it and thinking here on your discography, Instant Coffee, 1973. That was what we played. Chicano. That was the track. Chicano was on that album, and then you're Miss MIA for 4 years. So primarily, what were you doing in Los Angeles?
You know what's funny is that I guess I've been more in the background everywhere, but I've been making records since the 50s all the way up to now. Some of these things have been hits and some haven't, but they've all been good records, in my opinion. Few losers there, but everybody has.
What records in the 50s did you produce?
Well, I had my own record label, actually. It was called Sound Score, and I was in high school. And one of the first ones I had done was a guy named Armand Kay. And we put it out on a label called D-Town. It was funny because here we were running around trying to sell the record to Armand, to Harry Bogg, to Motown, to anybody that would buy it. And finally, this guy, Mike Hanks, put it out. It was our record. He put it out. I don't think we ever got paid, or we were just kids. But he put it out, and so that from there I had 2 or 3 other releases of different things that I tried to promote and never got anywhere with it. But I would say that then it was when I got discovered at the Golden World by John Reese, who was a producer there, and he let me do some arrangements of the Shades of Blue, which was that "Oh How Happy You Made Me" record that Edwin Starr wrote. And from that point on, I was working in all the recording studios here. Some of the stuff I did as a ghostwriter. There was Golden World. There was a guy named Gene Redd who was a producer who used to come in from New York, and he had did a record called "Girl Have Pity," which was the Fantastic Four. So I was writing the scores for him on that stuff, the strings and whatever. I'd go to school and drop the string parts off, and he'd do them. And what I'm getting at is I did a lot of records and never got my name on them. So it was, that was the early days. And then Dennis and I hooked up because it just seemed like we were both doing the same thing, trying to anyway. And we got along really great. We had laughs, and it just seemed like a perfect duo, you know. We just teamed up on a few sessions, and we started a company. Quite a few for Sussex during the L.A. days.
Yeah, no, that's what I was. Can you talk about? Because I mean, that is missing from the discography. Is on Sussex. I mean, even I don't think you were ghostwriting yourself in the '70s. You were already a household name.
No.
That
was
so I mean, like, what? I mean, because Booker T, that was a whole separate thing with Bill Withers and those cats. So.
Right. Well, we had on Sussex at that time. There was a group called Mutzy.
How do you spell it? How do you spell it?
Mutzie, Mutzy.
Wow, that's way off the radar, dude. You Mutzy.
Then there was a group called the Assemblage that I had done over there for Westbound. These are all groups that were in the 60s psychedelic time when the SRC was there, Bob Seger, the Frost. I mean, it was all in that period. Then there was a group called Yukon. They came out of Ontario. And a group called Amish.
Dude, you are blowing my mind right now. I mean, this is the most. I mean, this is. This is who like what? Who was who? Where was the budget for this stuff?
You know, in our career, we worked for every major label of the time, from RCA to MGM to ABC. You know, you name the label at those times. We had done projects for them, and I got to say, we had a career that I would say for a while there, we were turning out an album a month. We were like a production machine. And believe me, that wasn't simple in those days. You had to write everything, score it, find the tunes, record it, mix it, and get it out.
Yeah, but the hard work, that's why it sounded so good, man. It wasn't half-assed. What was the biggest radio play hit you had on Amish? Or I mean, I've never heard of any of those bands.
Well, they were marginal. You know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, the Jake Feinberg show. That, I mean, you're talking to that. That's what you're talking to.
The stuff was, you know, the kind of stuff that I don't think the labels could promote adequately. They were always throwing stuff out. This was a time in the music industry where you could go to an A&R man. There was actually a real A&R man who would listen to your garage tape or whatever kind of tape. And they would make deals by right and left for you. Today, I don't know how you do it. I don't know if you even go to it anymore.
Yeah, well, I just think that the point is that they were there. It wasn't the issue today is that the only investments that quote unquote A&R guys are going to make are on people that are going to automatically guarantee a return profit. It's all bottom line now.
You got to have a regional breakout and end up that be interested in you.
Right.
And you got to be on tour.
How did you meet Evie? How did you meet Evie Sands?
You mean from Fortune Records?
I just know that she got ripped off in Detroit in Motown. I just figured you guys might have connected back in Detroit sometime.
I'm trying to connect to this name.
Well, no, because we're mutual. When I saw your name yesterday, when I connected with you on Facebook, I said we had 8 mutual friends, and one of them was Evie. Evie Sands was a singer. She was in L.A. cooking when you were out there with Dennis. I don't recall you collaborating with her, but I just figured maybe you guys crossed paths because you've been cutting records since the 60s, and she had this. She was a white singer. I'll read you this story, and maybe it'll jog your memory here.
Well, you know one thing, Jake?
Yeah.
Facebook is one of these mechanisms where people friend you, and you friend them, and you may have never met them, and you may never ever meet them.
Well, no, that's the Jake Feinberg show, but Evie's not that kind of person. So, and she's your generation. So I'm just trying to find I want to get this quote here for you because it's interesting. Yeah, this is a story here. She goes, someone got a hold of a test pressing of Take Me for a Little While. I thought it was going to be a huge hit. I was brand new and unknown. Jackie Roth, who was coming off a #1 hit at the time, Selfish One, was in the studio looking for a follow-up. This promotion guy thought he'd be a hero and say, hey, I've got it. He took it over to the session and they loved it. They stopped what they were doing and instead tried to copy ours as closely as they could. Then they beat us to the street by about a week with the release. I remember we opened up Billboard and on the first page of the right-hand side it said, destined to be #1, Take Me for a Little While. I remember looking at it and saying, oh, that's the same title of the song we're releasing next week. Within a few hours we found out it was not just the same title, but it was the same song. My gut was like, I wonder if Theodore had anything to do with her at that time.
No, I got to be honest with you. I really didn't. I don't even know who she is.
Well, that's Facebook.
Looked it up on Facebook. I see her there as a friend.
Yeah, your friend or hers. I'm like, they must have. So, I mean, I'm just trying to be clear. Like, you never worked for Motown. So what were you doing in the mid 60s, late 60s prior to Westbound?
Oh, that would be Sussex Records.
when did Sussex break ground? I didn't think it was till like 671, 70.
Oh, well, okay. Well, before then was when I say Sussex Records, it was Clarence Avant who actually started Sussex.
Dig.
Previous to that, Clarence was like you might call an entrepreneur. He was a deal maker. He was everywhere, knew everybody. He was on everybody's board of directors. He was a well-connected individual. And we connected with him on Paul Perry's album, which we did in Detroit. From that point on, we connected with him with Rodriguez, Rare Earth, and all kinds of groups like Amish that I mentioned, and Mutzi, and all these groups were part of that early era. But we were also doing sessions for every other company. I'd have to go back through a box of records to tell you each one.
Well, you don't have to worry, because I'm gonna be out there digging through it with you in a couple months, dude. You don't have to work. Don't do the work right. No. So wait. I just want to be clear. Mutzi, Amish, those were bands you brought from Detroit to record in Los Angeles.
They were those particular. Yeah, that's correct. But we did them in Detroit. Part of what we did. There was another group called The Gallery that we did, and you may have heard them.
That record I've seen a lot, but it's a very bubblegumish. Like you said, you did everything.
Haven Country. We had a guy named Jack Rainwater, who was an American Indian.
Dude, I'm telling you, man. I mean, this stuff is mercurial. But I mean, as you can see, with your Showtime masterpiece that they took from you, and also Rodriguez, this stuff has staying power. Which is, I mean, that is unquantifiable, Theodore. You will transcend this life and live on heartily after this, my friend. I mean, that's insane.
Well, you know what? It's amazing because we're still doing it or trying to. Now we're old men, but hey, I'm still pushing some stuff out, and hope to get a new release out there on Ace Records coming out pretty soon. A lot of this has been digging up old masters and half-finished works and mixing them up and trying to see what we can. It's not like trying to make $1 million. It's just trying to put it out there.
Are you kidding me? You're preaching. Let me ask you a question. What did Avant love about you and Coffee?
I think it's because we were able to supply him with what he felt was interesting and creative work. Because one thing I'll tell you about Clarence, he was an eclectic in the sense that you couldn't put him in a bag as to what kind of music he might like.
Yeah, I love those people.
He seemed to be able to sense something that was creative and original and go with it, and he didn't follow convention.
Mike Theodore, we have eclipsed the 1 hour mark, and
Okay.
and we've only just begun. But it was an honor to connect with you, man. And I'd like to pick up. I will. My plan is to get to Detroit in April, so let's try to connect when I'm out there.
Okay, it was fun. Good talking to you, Jake. And the best, man. Good luck with the show.
Yeah, love always, man.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good
bye-bye.
night.
Mike Theodore, legendary producer, arranger, searching for Sugar Man. Jake Feinberg searching for it all. That's all for now. Peace.